We're live, David. All right, what's up, dude? Game 3. I did this. What, the 8th time? Got Theory podcast listeners. This is Jeremiah Bean. That guy over there is David Drake. And we're here for another episode. What up, David?
What up, Jeremiah?
I just ran barefoot in mud. I feel so
savage,
hippie. Yeah. I feel like I
feel connected to the Mother Earth that sustains you.
Yeah, it does. I do. Not really, actually. It's the first time I ever tried it, and it was okay. I mean, there is something a little more, I don't know. It'd be like if you wore a shirt every time you want to run, and the first time you take it off and run, kind of feels like that. It's like a whole new sensation, I guess. But
my shaman was recommending me to do that.
Your shaman?
Yes. She said, become one with the earth and seas.
I thought you were talking about like World of Warcraft. I was like, that's badass, man. Yeah, so not to talk about Bernie again. This time, I think we could talk a little bit about someone who's been a little bit hotter in the news recently.
So we're
a little bit hotter in the news, as if they're like flaming for Bernie. Bernie wins some state. They're like, Clinton.
Did you see the meme where it's like, can Bernie recover from his devastating win in Michigan?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like but we're going to move away from the Jewish guy and go to the demagogue who is raising nationalist hatred across the country and blaming it on minority groups.
I feel like there's a pattern there.
Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, so actually, I want to pull up something cool about that. There was a historian, so I've got a buddy who's got his degree in history. And let me find it. We asked for some insight about, a lot of people make references that Trump is like Hitler. So the two big things that I hear a lot about Trump, besides being racist, but I mean like two big statements people make is one, he's the new Hitler, right? And I don't think they're saying that sidelongly. I think they mean historically speaking, he's right. It's not just a Godwin's law, like dropping Hitler references at the drop of a hat, as Troy admits to doing on Community. Yeah. Yeah, it's not just that, but I think, historically speaking, they're saying this is what brought Hitler
rose to power. He got about 20% of the population, become super racist, and preyed on the fears that Germany was not great anymore. Yeah, and so, let's see. Somebody asked him about that and said, is this true? Is this similar to what happened with him? So let me get his point of view here. He gave us a quick little rundown because there's a lot more you can say, but nope, wrong one. Sorry, that's a good radio. Yeah, here it is. All right. He said, because somebody was talking about just in general the rise of American authoritarianism, which some of you may have seen that article going around, but it's this idea that. And I see this a lot in psychology, especially with parenting, but even with people doing this to themselves, being very authoritarian, right? Which is like, do this, and it's so the difference between authoritarian and authoritative, which is two different parenting styles, but it's also ways to treat yourself. Is authoritarian means I'm in charge, and here's what I'm going to do. It's like if I was your boss, I would do this. I would say, David, here's what you're going to do today. It's Monday, and because it can't be Sunday, right? So it's a work day. So it's Monday. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to come in at 8 o'clock. You're going to put on a pot of coffee for the office. At 8:30, I want you to start on that prep report. By 9:30, I would like you giving it to me, and I want 12-point font, and I wanted single space. Yeah, all I do is I give you the way to success and no other way, and I don't accept any way. You show up with 11-point font, and I say fail, right? That's authoritarian, which is like you have a clear-cut way to be successful, but it is only that way, and any other way fails. And people do this to themselves as well. Authoritative parenting and ways to treat yourself is to say, David, hey, by Friday, let's get this office in a place where we can have that financial meeting with our CFO, our chief financial officer. I'm gonna leave you, however you think to get that done, okay? And that's authoritative, which is I am your authority for sure, but I'm not using that as a way to control you per se. That's authoritarian, to control someone. So anyway, the authoritarianism is really common in people. And the weird thing is they understand that it's shit when you ask them this. Like this is how we do start the parenting thing. I say, all right, so I'm gonna give you a piece of paper. And I've actually become a big fan of having people write things down, because first I used to think this was hokey, but then I realized people won't, because of the psychological fact of like, you know this, you did this when you were a horrible Mormon. You have them write it down because you know
they
that
feel like they're more bought in when they've written it with their own hand.
Exactly. So I was like, oh, fuck it. I'll use little psychological backhanded tricks, but whatever. So now I have them write it down. I take a piece of paper, I fold it in half, and I write it, and I sit it in front of them. I go, I'm going to have you do something a little weird. I'm going to have you write down something on paper, but would you be willing to do it? Yeah, they say. And the reason why is because once they say yes, more buy-in. They give them a pen. You say on one side, it says good boss. The other side says bad boss. I want you to think about all the qualities the very worst boss you've ever worked for has. What kind of things did he or she do? What kind of thing? How did he or she treat you? And then how did you gain success or favor in his or her eyes, right? And so they write the whole thing down, right? And if they need help, prompt them more. But you write as much as you can. Now the good boss, and they do that. And then they realize, and I say, all right, so let's look at this. And 100% of the time, without fail, even if they don't do the exercise right, through Socratic questioning, you find out that they prefer authoritative, right? They work best under the authoritative. Which one are you more likely to do overtime for? I ask them. Which one are you more likely to, work extra hours and on a project for them that only benefits them? What's something you're more likely to do something for the business? If it's like, hey, this Saturday we have a chance to get some investors, but it involves coming in on a Saturday. You don't have to do it, but if you want to, you can. And they're more likely to do it. They understand that you get more buy-in and you work better under authoritative boss, but you don't always meet every deadline, right? But you do overall, you do more for them, and you're a better employee. So they understand that. But whenever I ask them what kind of parenting style they use, so many times it's authoritarian. They're like, no. I tell them, sit down, keep your hands in your your lap. Pick up pick up your stuff, or pick up those 6 items, or whatever it is. But they just tell them things, and I'm like, well, how about you say this? Well, anyway, I won't get too much into it. You get the idea. But There's a rise of that idea that authoritarianism is the way to go, even though intrinsically, if you ask them, they understand it's wrong. But whenever they want to get things done, whenever they're in charge, they like to use authoritarianism by nature.
Mm-hmm. So just going back to what you were originally talking about with your friend who's got the history degree, what did he say about the Hitler comparison? Is that way off the mark, or is it?
Well, he said, so I'll use his quotes because this is his specialty and I don't want to screw this up. But he says, I have a great many thoughts about it, but unfortunately don't have the time to do it all justice. But he gives a summary. He says, they're right. The authoritarian impulse is there, but it's always been there and it always will be. But that's not all of it. So he doesn't agree that it's on the rise. He says, but that's not all of it. It's not just that accounts for the it's not that just that accounts for the rise of Trump. He also speaks to vast swaths of the disaffected in this country, many of them lower middle class, and even some working class. The Great Recession has affected much anger among the lower depths. Much anger among the lower depths for obvious reasons, and we always see extremes grow during tough times. The worse it is, the more we see it. Consider communists and neo-Nazis being elected in Greece in the last few years, as they suffered terribly economically. Partisanship and the inability of politicians to compromise magnifies all of this. But here's the thing: some of those same forces are also what accounts for the surprisingly strong support for Bernie, though that comes more from the working class and poor than from the lower middle class, though from some of them too. Folks who have been marginalized from politics and from the system and who have been frustrated by that and persisting economic stress and feeding both phenomena. I think you meant phenomena. And again, there is nothing new or terribly unexpected in any of this if history is seen as a guide. If I get more time, I will elaborate my thoughts further.
Yeah, so what makes it different to me is that this is like if Hitler rose to power while a good person was rising to power at the same time and they were facing off. Like we saw those riots / almost riots in Chicago, right, for the protests.
Yeah. So
it really does feel this almost biblical good versus evil kind of narrative is being played out. And I don't know how much of that is me projecting, because we like to root for the good guy and boo for the bad guy. But I've never seen, and I try and be very impartial with politics. I usually have just disdained every side, but I've never seen such a distinctly good versus evil, like honest good person versus filthy, disgusting. Like the more hyperbole, the more superlative on each end. Like it's almost a stark contrast, which you rarely get to see in politics. Is that just my lens of bias, or is there something different about this year than we usually have?
I think, and our listeners may have a different idea too, but I think the same way. I kind of thought that because you get the far, like Trump represents like the super far right? Like this idea that you bring yourself, meritocracy is what we call it. And I battle against this every day. The first time I heard this, I thought that this was a given. I was in multicultural psychology, and she said, we don't live in a meritocracy. And this is the first time I heard this. I'm in grad school. I was like, what's a meritocracy? And she goes, and I kind of thought of it. I was like, you mean it's a place, the people who
You rise by
get
your
the
own
most,
merit.
yeah. And she goes, yeah, you achieve things because of yourself. And I was like, of course you do. And then she goes, no. She's like, no, it's not though. I mean, we manipulate these factors. There was that billionaire who bought out, did you hear about this? He bought out a block in the ghetto. And I think it was in the ghetto. It was a poor neighborhood.
You're not allowed to use the word ghetto if you're white.
Go fuck yourself, idiot. I'm like, academics use that. What the hell is wrong with you? Anyway, whatever. So I know. I also got told that did you hear Bernie Sanders made that joke about the mental health thing and people lost their shit?
Yeah, 'cause don't marginalize the mentally ill.
I know somebody put that on there. And I was like, whoa, hey, you realize that whenever I read that, I read it out loud into a clinic full of mental health professionals, and we all laughed. Like, there's nothing. If anyone understands mental health problems, it's us. We got a PhD in mental health problems and how it affects people. I advocate and lobby for mental health coverage on a regular basis. I get it. We work with these people and we see the destruction it causes. It's still funny to make a joke occasionally. Like if that person was mentally ill, that's not funny. Like if the person, if the Republicans all had intellectual disabilities or something, that's not funny. But if you look at someone and you go, wow, your reasoning makes me think that you're mentally ill. If you insinuate that, it's funny. Like even if someone did it to me, it doesn't have to be disparaging people who have mental health problems. That's just weird. But anyway, whatever.
I usually play it safe and go with the free public education option because it's the same idea. Like we need less dumb people in our system. But that kind of brings us into our bigger topic about narcissistic personality disorder, because a lot of people have been we use narcissism pretty fast and loose in this country, right? Like there's a diagnostic definition of what narcissistic personality disorder is, and then there's the way we use it, which is kind of like an insult. Like that guy was such a narcissist, he was just always cared about himself and he's such an egomaniac. So we kind of use it interchangeably, one as a mental health disorder and the other one as kind of an insult, which is kind of what those people are complaining about, is like, don't use mental health disorders as insults, right? Mm-hmm. So Donald Trump, I'm not going to ask you to diagnose him because you don't have the credentials or the exposure, but is it okay to call him a narcissist, or is this one of those hyperbolic things that people are throwing out?
I mean, I always wonder about that when people say like I'm depressed, or that person's depressed, or they're anxious, or they're OCD,
or he's a real I'm super OCD about that,
psychotic. I'm always like, are you inferring that they have a diagnosis, or are you just using the colloquial term, right?
Right.
Like when someone says crazy, that person's crazy, and I'm like, you mean that you don't understand their reasoning, or that they really are, they really have executive functioning problems, like they're maybe schizophrenic or something? Are you making a clinical statement, or just a euphemism, or not a euphemism, but a colloquialism, right? Mm-hmm. I always wonder about that. But so I kind of go both ways. So narcissism, you probably know about Narcissus.
Yeah, Narcissus was cursed by the gods because he was so vain that he was like the most beautiful man, right? So and he was in love with Echo, who was a nymph. And he ended up being cursed to like stare at his own reflection in the pool because he was so entranced by what he looked like. And it wasn't even the curse that made him stare. He was just super hot, so he's looking at his reflection. But the gods cursed him for his vanity to turn into a flower, so he would just continue staring into the pool forever. And there's a species of flower that does that. They just kind of like lean over and look at their reflections, which is the Greeks pre-science, right? So they would come up with origin stories for every thing that they would notice. So someone saw those flowers and they named them Narcissus after this story that they made up for why those flowers were doing that.
Huh. Oh, I didn't know all that. I just heard about the thing about him, this guy, Narcissus, like the most beautiful person alive, or human being, but he happened to be a male.
He was really ridiculously good looking.
Yeah, and he ends up coming across his reflection in the pool, and he stares at it and he loses his will to live, kind of thing. Just kind of like, oh man, I'm just going to stare forever. And then he dies that way, if I remember right. Mm-hmm. But anyway, it's that idea of this, you're so enwrapped in yourself. This is the modern kind of, or the non-clinical way to look at this. And I actually pulled up a definition because I was like, how does the average person look at this? I don't recall, like a non-professional
But I looked it up and it just says the dictionary definition, and you can tell me if this is about what you're kind of thinking of. It says excessive or erotic interest in oneself and one's physical appearance.
Right. So then there's a picture of Trump, right, next to it.
Yeah. Textbook definition. But narcissistic personality disorder is a real thing, and I've worked with 2 before.
So what's the difference between like a Trump who's just like, oh, I'm the best, I'm a winner, I put my name on a giant tower, it's called Trump Tower, Trump steaks, Trump wine.
Like you said, man, we can't make diagnoses like from just exposure, media exposure, basically, and seeing interviews and stuff. But I mean, I'd put money on it that I could, if I gave him a scheduled like a scheduled clinical interview for the DSM-5, that he might make it, man. Like it's yeah. Okay, so I'll just read out the things and give caveats, the requirements. So you need significant impairments in personal functioning manifested by impairments in self-functioning, so identity or self-direction. The identity would be excessive reference. Okay, so follow me here and think about Trump. Excessive reference to others for self-definition and self-esteem regulation. So these are people. What that means is this: whenever people, you need people around you who are sycophants, right? Mm-hmm. Who just kind of go, "Oh man, you're so great, you're so great." So you see these people surrounded by people who will tell them they're awesome or make them feel awesome. Mm-hmm. Okay, so exaggerated self-appraisal may be inflated or deflated. So this, they constantly refer to themselves and appraise themselves, so thinking about how awesome they are, right? And it can be inflated or deflated or vacillate between extremes. Emotional regulation mirrors fluctuations in self-esteem. So basically, they're going to have great highs and great lows, right? So it's almost kind of I wouldn't say bipolar, right? I never like to use that word because people are tie onto it. They're like, oh, you mean the disorder? Oh my God, I have it. I'm like, stop. It does. The clinical definition of those words is totally different than what you guys are hearing. But anyway, so yeah, their identity in general, this is really reflected by the people they keep around them, very sensitive to it, which is funny. So there's a couple of things that happen. One of which is that they want to only keep around people who talk about how great they are, like, right, aggrandize themselves. But here's the other part: they actually have no tolerance to be criticized.
If somebody was to insinuate that their penis was small, they would lose their shit on national TV.
They would lose their shit on national, running for president at national TV. And anytime, listen, this is not crazy part. Yeah, people get weird about that word. Listen, I'm a mental health professional. Crazy is not a weird word. Chill. I mean, there's plenty of things we're right on. Don't say things like retarded. Don't say things like something where it's an actual disorder, right? Like I don't even like when people say OCD. Like I just don't. Or PTSD, that one bugs me too. Like, don't say that. There are people who actually have PTSD, and when you say that, it really kind of marginalizes it.
Which words are we allowed to say? Crazy is one of them?
Well, I feel like it's this. If it's a real disorder, crazy is not a disorder. You're never going to hear someone say that. But OCD is. Being psychotic is. It's a real thing, right? Being a psychopath is a real thing. And you can say that one because it's not like you're going to hurt their feelings, right?
Yeah. By definition, they're beyond reproach of your insults.
And even if they weren't, I don't mind if they're insults. I mean, these are people who take other people's lives literally for granted. So anyway, so I think that's crazy is not and will never be a clinical term. In fact, we hate that term. We don't even use mental illness. It's not a clinical term. That's a legal term. That doesn't mean fuck all. So when someone's like, he's mentally ill, I'm like, I don't know what that means. What do you mean ill? You mean his brain is inflamed? I won't get into that. Anyway, point is narcissism for this guy. So the other one is self-direction. So goal setting is based on gaining approval from others, right? So you're going to see them do things like instead of building a brand like Walmart, they're going to build a brand of their own name. Okay, like that's kind of good. Like the Waltons, if their store, if they said this is the Waltons store, it's Walmart, but it could have been the Waltons. But the Waltons, really, that's a generational thing too. But Trump. It says Trump on there. That's his last name. Trump Towers. Trump. He puts Trump Steaks. He puts his name on fucking everything. It's not like some of these people who open up other segments,
right?
You know, like.
But that's kind of his thing, though. Like he's a brand. Like he's marketing himself. It's like if he were Ronald McDonald.
Well, that's what I mean. Like Apple is called Apple. It's not called Steve Jobs. Microsoft Windows is called Microsoft.
But isn't that just good? Isn't that just good business? Isn't that good marketing though? Like, did you see the John Oliver thing about the Trump brand?
Yeah.
Like, doesn't that seem like it could just be a deliberate, rational choice to say, like, all right, my name for whatever reason is associated with success, so I'm going to put it on everything.
So what you're saying right now is we need to differentiate those two things, and you're absolutely right. This is why you can't make an armchair diagnosis. You need to understand why people do things. So, for example, if you see someone
doing something like checking their door over and over again, you can't go OCD. You need to know what the thought process is that's causing that.
They might have had their house broken into the night before, and they're just very careful.
Yeah. Are they compelled to do that because of some obsession? That's obsession compulsive disorder, right? And do they, how often do they do it? Does it cause social function, or does it cause dysfunction? Is it deviant enough to be, different and weird, right? Weird being other or different.
Don't use outside of the norm, please.
See, I know. That's the kind of shit I expect, because I'm like, what? No, that doesn't. What? Anyway, okay, so. Oh yeah. So why is he putting his name on everything? Why did he choose that to be his brand rather than something like Casino Towers or something? I don't know, but I have a suspicion over time after seeing all this, and he's really, really, really anytime sensitive to people criticizing him, and he only surrounds himself with sycophants. And so whenever people criticize him, he goes, no, and he'll just start going off on why that's not the case.
He threatens lawsuits at the drop of a hat.
Yeah, I know. And
defamation of character.
And then when people, he'll. It just, you can see a compulsion there to discredit that thing or person, right? You're a loser, shut up kind of thing. It's weird. I think it's, anyway, whatever. So that, and you also get this, impairments in interpersonal functioning. So empathy and intimacy. It has to be one or the other. It doesn't have to necessarily be both. You can get people who are empathetic and can't get intimate.
Seems to be suffering from empathy. He's people getting beat up at his rallies. He's like, yeah, beat him up. I'll pay your legal bills. Like, that's a pretty fucked up thing to say. Can we say fucked up? Is that a clinical?
See, this is what I'm talking. If people take, this is confirmation bias. It has to do with signal error. But if you only are, if your meter to understand when something is offensive is only when you are offended, how will you know if something is offensive and you're not offended then? Like, is that offensive?
It's not a reliable metric.
Yeah, and I get frustrated because I'm like, oh, come on. Like, what about, like fucked up, for example? Is that bad? And I'm like, well, let's hear it. And then you say something, they're like, sounds good. Yeah, then yeah. And I'm like, well, but then you could do anything. I mean, obviously we shouldn't say things like mongoloid, which used to be a term for people with Down syndrome or a lot of different problems, developmental disorders. But mongoloid was a clinical term. And now it was used so shittily that now we can't say that, obviously.
Yeah, people say they have a touch of the Downs, I believe is the...
Touch of the Downs.
No, so yeah, I don't see him having a lot of empathy unless that's just an elaborate show. But if it is, it's been one he's been playing for a long time, because pre-politician Trump was kind of a dick when he was on reality TV, right? Like he seemed to really relish shattering people's chances on his The Apprentice show. He seems to want to fuck his own daughter. There's a whole segment on that. The Daily Show. Like he's got some interpersonal issues that I don't know if it's just all the facade he's generated, the character he's created.
Yeah, well, okay. So what would you expect? What kind of wife would you expect someone like that to have, if he did have empathy problems?
Oh, just really hot wife who doesn't really do much else but looks good for other people.
Yeah, and maybe an imported wife
model. Yeah.
Yeah. Now that doesn't distinguish him from other, rich old billionaires, right? Like, so it's hard to say, but it is a possible yes, because he didn't disprove the narrative there. It doesn't mean it's true, but it's something to consider. You'd also consider him, like his kids would also be sycophants of him, which they are, because he probably demands that sort of thing, I imagine. Not in words, but by behaviorally, right? He'll probably severely punish anything where they criticize him. And you see that. Yeah. So, So the next little segment is, so either he had a problem with empathy or intimacy. We can't make any, statements about his intimacy. We don't know, but his empathy, it seems to be there. Again, we'd have to sit him down. The next one is pathological personality traits in the following domain. So antagonism, characterized by either grandiosity or attention seeking, or both. Grandiosity, the clinical term is like, I would say entitled is the word, not like the Republicans say, but I mean the real definition, which is like, let's say you go into McDonald's and you go, you're like, they should, one of the things is they skip lines. Narcissists are very often just walk past people and go straight to the front. And you're like, what the fuck are you doing? There's clearly a line here, right?
Yeah.
You just didn't even assess that situation because you're so grandiose of yourselves.
Right.
And the big thing about it too is literally believing you're better than everyone else, and not just saying that to yourself occasionally. You wake up and you look in the mirror and you're like, you're better than everyone, you're awesome, you got this, which hopefully everyone's done at some point, maybe before an interview, to pump themselves up. I do it before a race. I'm always like, I'm fast, I got this, I can do this, I can place, I've trained harder than these people, I got this, but I don't, somewhere inside I don't actually believe that. When I finish, I'm like, oh my god, I did it, I can't believe, or whatever.
Right.
And when people beat me, I'm like, well, yeah, he's good. I'm never like, how dare he, that kind of thing. But the second one is attention seeking. And we're talking about not just what everyone does, which, post to Twitter, Facebook. We're talking about like excessive shit. So like the big one to me is running for president. I don't know what goes through your head as a billionaire where all of a sudden you think I should go for president. I mean,
yeah, it's going around.
It's weird. It's just weird. Like Steve Jobs didn't. Someone asked Bill Gates. He just didn't ask me anything if he was going to run for president. He's like, no, that sounds like a horrible job, and I am in no way qualified for that job. Yeah, he goes, right. Do you know what all goes into that? I mean, we're talking public appearances, foreign affairs, constitutional law, and understanding the inside of the government. No way. But I'll bet Trump never entertained those ideas. So we're talking that kind of attention seeking. We're talking about running for president probably just to get the attention. I don't know what else. Nobody knows what he wants. He's so different on the issues. He goes one way and then the other. Nobody knows. Like Dan Carlin talks about that in his hardcore or his Common Sense. Did you hear that one?
Yeah, I think so. Here's the thing. Were there any other symptoms for the?
Oh yeah, I mean there's 3 more.
Okay, yeah, go through those because then I want to bring up, speaking of podcasts, Crack just did an episode about narcissism in America. Oh. And I want to run some of their ideas by you and see what you think.
Oh yeah, I do know a couple of experiments on that. But one is, okay, so the last 3 are, so if we can agree, or maybe not, but at least entertain the idea that it may be grandiose and or attention seeking. I would say clinically I've seen evidence of both, but I can't really say for sure, differentiate that from just run-of-the-mill billionaire playboy. Okay, the other 3, the impairments in personality functioning and the individual's personality trait expression are relatively stable across time and consistent. So all this one is just a cover your bases. We're not just seeing a flare of awesomeness, right? Like an NBA player right after he wins the finals, he goes and spends a bunch of money, is attention seeking. You know what I mean? Like it's understandable, and it's a personality disorder, not just a flash in the pan. The next one is the impairments in personal functioning and the individual's personality trait expression are not better understood as normative for the individual's developmental stage or sociocultural environment. This is just saying not teenagers aren't narcissists. Okay.
Right.
So,
but if you're a grown-ass man, you shouldn't be acting like a teenager.
Yeah, or kids. Kids do this. Jesus, kids. Kids will just, they'll walk straight up to someone and be like, oh, yeah, I want that candy. If someone's handing out candy, no semblance of a line and no sense that, like, you just cut it from that guy.
Kids are little monsters.
Yeah, so this is normal. And also sociocultural environment. That just means in America, what we would do here maybe seem very narcissistic to someone in, like, a very traditional, like, Japan or something. And vice versa. Someone from...
to rate Trump as far as, like, billionaires go? Is that, like, the socioeconomic environment we have to put him in?
Kind of, or even if he's running for president, I mean, just other presidents or other presidential candidates, or just other people. I mean, there's like a lot of ways you could judge it, but, clinical judgment. The next one is the impairments in personality functioning and the individual's personality trait expression are not solely due to the direct physiological effects of a substance or general medical condition. This is always a catch-all in the end of them. So You know what that means.
So they're not getting fucked up when they're doing it.
Right. And he didn't have like, head trauma or something like that. Or
right. Railroad spike to the brain.
Right, railroad spike in the brain. So that's all of them.
So you're not going to diagnose them because that's beyond what you can officially do. But if you were putting money down, we are seeing a lot of red flags for narcissistic personality disorder with Trump.
He's like one of my go-to examples of a possible case of it. Whenever I'm talking to an individual, they're like, I think my husband's narcissistic. And I'm like, all right. I mean, we can test him if you want, but here was what that would actually look like. He's like, he's like,
carry a picture in your clipboard. You're like, wait, does it look like this? Yeah. No, probably not then.
Now not all narcissists are like him, but he's a narcissist who's also a billionaire, so he can play out his fantasies. That's the difference.
And that's what they were talking about on Cracked. So they had a couple different kind of theories that they were just speculating on, and one of them was that like personality disorders, sociopathy, borderline, whatever the disorder is, they're not beneficial, right, to the species. There's sort of anomalies that you're like, oh, well, that kind of makes you not able to function in a tribal social network that we have formed as humans. For example, if you have OCD, like that's a harmful thing to your life. You have to spend a lot of wasted hours washing your hands or whatever it presents as. But they were theorizing that narcissistic personality disorder might be a disorder that started off potentially harmful to you, but has become, in this kind of modern age, almost an asset. And that's why you see so many people, celebrities, athletes, politicians, who seem to be suffering from this rise to the top of society and win big.
Okay.
Because what narcissistic personality disorder does is it makes you, on some ways, your self-esteem is untouchable by feedback, right? Like if you do something like a dick, most people feel shame after that and they stop, but they just keep doing it. And then our current system like awards that kind of reality TV show asshole behavior. And so instead of being like suffering for it, you actually rise to the top by being a huge asshole and being unapologetic about it. Whereas most people just feel too much shame to get that far.
Well, so the current level of thinking, or the current kind of zeitgeist, I guess, in the literature and amongst psychologists, is that all of them are evolutionarily beneficial. Anxiety, what that does is, okay, so you get this in like meerkats or prairie dogs. You get this one that has like a family streak, or there's a few of these that get this, and they're more hyper alert than the others. They're always poking their heads out. They're looking out more. They're doing that kind of thing, right? You get these birds that are like this too. You get them in zebras, these ones that just are constantly threat checking. They die earlier. They have heart disease, just like us. They have all the problems anxiety people have. But it's very helpful for the flock, right?
Okay, so it's good for the species, bad for the individual.
Yeah, which happens a lot, right?
But what they're saying, like that's some of the theories behind homosexuality, where it's like it's not going to help your genes get passed on, but your family's genes get an extra warrior or whatever you need in the tribe. But what they're saying is it used to be bad for the individual, but now with this specific disorder, it seems to be helpful for the individual.
Well, maybe I should move into the other ones too. Depression, for example, is there's a thing that. So if you self-select yourself out of a culture or an environment based on some perception you have of your own self-worth, that's, if it's an accurate one, that's actually good. You want to take out people who are not performing well socially, right? Males, females, whoever. You want to take them out of your tribe. That way your tribe will, over time, get better and better. So they would, one of the symptoms, for example, is social withdrawal with depression. You get social withdrawal, you get blunt affect. So it's hard to be cheered up about things. You also have anhedonia. Hedonia being like you have fun doing things. Anhedonia mean you no longer have fun doing things that used to make you have a good time. And that's good. So it's good for the species because that person shows up and they go, I'm just not having fun, grazing grass or doing whatever the hell I used to be doing. I'm getting out. And so they self-select themselves out based on some perception of their social standing, which is good if your social standing, if that's true, right, for the species. But if it's not, then it's not. And you get things like OCD. Well, you're talking about someone who's extra clean. Gerophobia is one of the kinds. Other kinds are like ritualistic behaviors. Well, that's one way to find a causal link between you and your environment, is to try out these ritualistic behaviors, right? And so having one that looks like it's working that's not is actually beneficial. But if you have someone like this or groups of people like this who keep doing these weird things, right, these strange, and they have a magical thinking is what we call it, which means like they think that they do them clicking and turning off the stove over and over and over again, or whatever it is they do, checking, counting, has some effect, some magical effect, like now my mom won't die.
Right. Praying.
Yeah. Or that one's a social version of the same thing, a socially reinforced version of the same thing, right? That praying affects that. And you're like, how? And they're like, well, I don't know, And they may even, many times, in almost all cases, they understand that it's weird, but they just can't keep themselves from doing it. Now imagine that in a non-language species, you can't talk to someone else and realize that it's stupid. You're just so compulsed to do it that you end up finding these cool, like, oh my gosh, if you take this coconut, turn it over, bash it against this 3 times, hit this, do this, blah, blah, it produces milk or whatever, right? You've solved this puzzle just because you have an OCD problem. Now, with narcissism, that's actually very beneficial. You're talking about someone who may not be an alpha male or an alpha female, and they press themselves to that position and they try it out anyway, right?
Sheer force of will almost.
Yeah, and they may intimidate the other person because primates in particular don't like to fight. Even you see them fight, people like to fight all the time. I'm like, no, they altercate all the time. They have something called displacement, where the male, alpha male, someone who's higher than you walks in, and they'll walk in on their little knuckles and they'll look around, and you're expected to divert your eyes. You look down and you like back up and you give them room. You let them walk through. We do this too. When a celebrity walks through, we get out of their way, right? Or someone who seems more important than you, we let them walk by. And it's the same sort of thing. So this allows you to have that air to you, and you demand the respect, and you don't have to get into a fight.
to do it. And so it could propel you to the top. And it's the same thing here. I mean, I don't think it's changed. No, I don't think. I'm pretty damn sure it hasn't changed at all. It's always
useful.
It's always helpful to be a narcissist. It's just that there's a social repercussion for people who. So you're going to gather sycophants around you, people who like you, right? And if that's enough to suffice you, then you're going to propel yourself to, grounds that that nobody else is going to be. So just statistically speaking, I'm saying that they usually do pretty well for themselves. Narcissists, you find narcissism a lot more whenever you do data analysis in CEOs. You see it in politicians, and you see it in
actors.
Third one, fuck, who?
I would guess actresses.
Oh, no, it didn't. That wasn't a finding, but they probably didn't even test them. So I don't know.
That would be a severely helpful, like the ability to like bounce back from any criticism and to take rejection and still think you're the best.
Yeah. Oh, police. That was it. Those are the three you find them more often in. At a higher percentage rate, but at a very high percentage rate. Whenever we give it to business management students, CEOs, people who end up being CEOs, it was a huge spike, like to the point where you have to change it. Yeah, so it does. It's always beneficial. The people who say it's not is just wrong. It's very beneficial. It's just very costly too to those who are not down with your antics.
And the other thing people talk about when they talk about narcissists are they tend to generalize the millennials, Generation Y, like the kids who grew up in the 80s and 90s. As the new millennium was coming around, they say that they're the most narcissistic generation. They're, especially American millennials, just more, here's a picture of what I had to eat today. Everyone look at it and feel like they need to hear 140 characters about my thoughts on whatever I'm watching, the Oscars. Everybody read it and repost and refollow and please subscribe and like my blog and like my Facebook. Is there anything to that, or is that a chicken or in the egg situation where kids are using the tools that they have and that encourages narcissistic behavior, or are they attracted to those tools because of a narcissistic personality, like maybe not a disorder, but at least a bend towards self-focus?
That one's tough to answer, but this is what we have found. We have found that millennials and Generation Me is like kind of the late millennials, like these ones who are just now hitting college. We have had a chance to collect on them for a while since they were in high school because we've been curious about that. They've had these selfies, Instagrams, Facebook,
Snapchat,
Twitter,
yeah.
Snapchat. Yeah, very much me. So we've been intensely curious. And there's things they do that are yes, but remember, one of the caveats is it's not a socio-cultural explanation. So that's the difficult part we're having right now is explaining that, well, maybe it's just because everyone else is doing it. Can they all be narcissistic? That seems weird because then it's not a disorder, right? It's
just a norm.
Movement.
Why religion's not a disorder.
So do they have more of the self-grandiosity? I don't know. Because the reason why they're posting things is not necessarily that they think everyone's so interested. They probably think everyone's as interested as they are because you get likes and little hearts and things on Instagram or whatever it is.
You have pretty realistic feedback of how many people are interested in your Facebook status.
Right. And people who persist minus that may be narcissistic. But me, I always combat against that. I'm very cautious about juvenophobia, and it happens in every situation. I use that's not a real term, by the way, juvenophobia. It's just something Chris Ferguson, friend of the show, came up with that I really love.
He brought up the Romans like writing about how these new plays are going to corrupt the youth and how we can't show these Greek tragedies to the youth anymore because of the kids these days and their rock and roll. So it's a very old. As far as we have records, we have generations fearing the new generation coming up.
Exactly.
Zeus murdered Cronus, right? Like it's just part of our cultural zeitgeist as humans is we're afraid of being replaced by our progeny. Yeah,
and we have this self-inflated worth of ourselves, and then we see the other one's different, and different is oftentimes seen as bad. And so, but with this in particular, that's the thing that I don't think that most people understand when they ask those questions is they, like I said before, they know exactly how much people like it because you actually have a number there, right? It's 64 likes, and you're like, wow, that one got liked more. So they're actually probably, okay. So do they have behaviors that are very like, me and stuff? Yes, they do. And we do see that a lot. There were other ways to do that in the past. Now we just have more ability or time or ability to do it. But it's not like, here's the thing I always disagree with. Here's the line. Nobody cares about that stuff, they say, or nobody cares about all those pictures, which is just false. Like their peers do care. Their peers are logging on and commenting and liking or whatever.
So it's not an irrational perception. If your Instagram gets 120 likes and people forward it, then you have a pretty good idea that people are liking what you put on Instagram. In fact, a more realistic idea than perhaps before the internet, when you were just like, hey, this is my scrapbook. You want to see my vacation slides?
Yes.
Everyone has to pretend that they can watch it. Like, we've been doing that forever, right? We've just been forcing captive audiences to look at pictures that we took since photographs came around. At least now we have an idea. We have a realistic sort of metric for how many people actually like it.
Yeah, so you'll find me on that side of the debate, your side, this part you're talking about right now. I say that I point out those inconsistencies all the time. There's no data to show that, that you're right or I'm right, but the logic of it compels me because I'm like, well, people have always been doing that. People have been shoving shit in my face I don't give a fuck about themselves forever. Look at any conversation.
Last night. Can I tell you about my dream I just had last night?
Exactly. Dude, my wife has a friend. Can I say that? She doesn't listen to this podcast. She's really
okay.
So she very much does all just meme monster is what we call them as jokes, where they're just like, oh, let me tell you about this. Oh my gosh, let me tell you about this. Oh, and they'll even cut you off to talk about themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
and one could argue that there's something narcissistic about starting a podcast, like thinking that people want to hear what you have to say about an issue.
It could be. You could be narcissistic. I think in our case, not with this one, but with our first one was people were like, oh, you guys should record that. You guys should record. I mean, for how many years? 10, 15? Yeah. Record what you guys are saying. And I was like, nobody's going to like that. So we were quite the opposite, but it took off anyway. But anyway, that's my thoughts.
Yeah, this is just interesting. I wanted to see because as a teacher, I'm exposed to a lot of that juvenophobia where it's like kids these days, and you hear the faculty, like the older faculty, being like, oh, they won't get off their phones. They're always on social media. It's really going to mess with them. And I'm like, yeah, it's going to change the way they think. Everything does. Like every environment we put them in is going to rewire their brains in some way, if you want to phrase it that way. But I don't know. There's pros and cons, right? I think that these kids are better at multitasking, like, balancing a lot of different things and juggling different tasks than I am. Maybe they have less focus. Maybe they can't sit down with a book and read for 2 hours, like, some of the older millennials and the baby boomers and the Generation X people could. But I don't know. I don't know if it's necessarily bad just because it's a different way of thinking.
Right. I was going to talk about
that's better adapted to this information age that we're in, where we are bombarded by more information than we have time to read.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, we're adapting to our environment. I think that there are things at risk, and those are very real conversations that I'd like to have. For example, you look at any older generation. This is like an anecdotal thing, so I don't know, but I know of my grandpa or my mom, they have a browser that they use, like Chrome or whatever, and there's one tab open. I don't understand that. And I'm like, have you been surfing the internet for like an hour? She's like, yeah. I'm like, what the fuck? Like with me, I've got multiple windows with multiple tabs. I've got
4 windows right now, and there's like 8 tabs between them. And that's just since we started an hour ago.
Yeah. With Windows 10, I've got 4 desktops. So I'll switch between them. I've got work, I've got play, and then and each one of those has 2. So, because I've got 2 monitors. I've got a lot of shit going on, but I get a lot of stuff done too. But I do know, and there is a real concern here, is there was a psychologist who just wrote about this in one of the journals. He did an editorial piece where he talked about the fact of this very concern. And we don't have to get into this, but he said that he noticed that in himself as well. He goes, me, like anyone else who's tech savvy, has 12 different devices, does 20 different things at once. You got something going off here on your phone while you're looking at this, and you got your work here. Mm-hmm. So I became worried. So he said in a sabbatical, he left. He went somewhere. I don't remember where he went. And he tried to just sit there and not do anything, and then sit there and just read. And he noticed himself having a real problem with that. Mm-hmm. And so there is a real concern if that's something we need to keep. And that's the premise that we always jump away from. Like, we just assume that there's value in being able to sit and read a book for 3 hours without doing anything else. And there might be, but you'd have to prove that before we could prove that it's bad that we can't do that anymore. Because I had the same problem. I used to try and read for an hour every day in a hammock, just read some Rousseau or Moliere, whatever that I'm, just trying to keep my French up, learn new vocabulary, and just have some reading time. And I found it really hard to do, because what I like to do when I read now is I like to have an audiobook going while I'm on a run or doing my shopping or playing a video game or doing something else. I like to multitask. Now, is it detrimental to my life that I can't sit and read anymore? Maybe, but I have to prove that first. Because right now I'm able to take in information and do something else at the same time. So it seems more useful. And it's working out for you socially. I mean, you bring up interesting things in conversations, and
I'm still able to be well read. I'm still able to cite stuff that I'm reading. It's just I'm reading with my ears now, and my eyes are doing something else.
Yeah, it's funny that people call them naive in the same breath that they say, "Oh, they've got too much going on." Right. I'm like, well, they're probably learning a lot too. This is a Google generation. They know a lot of shit. objective facts. So.
Yeah, I hate the demonization of millennials. Like, you see it everywhere, and you and I we're just barely in the millennials. Like, we made it like 3 or 4 years into that generation's like threshold, but I relate to them. I just feel like they grow up in a really hard time. Their economy gets kind of fucked by the generations that precede them. They graduate into a terrible recession, like the worst one since the Depression, and then they just get shat on because they're not out buying homes and getting married, and they're being called narcissists. It's like, well, what do you expect? What are they supposed to do?
They got nailed. They were like, "Oh, they're too child." This is the narrative, okay? So
yeah, it goes back to that narcissistic myth where they're too focused on themselves. They don't care about other people. They're selfish. And
most of them go to like master school. So this is one of the things I read about that was criticizing them. They end up getting masters and PhDs. This is definitely me, but one of the things it said was because they're too terrified to have a real life, a real job, and I'm like, that's not it. Everyone I talk to that went. So many people are going back to graduate school now. I can't tell you the incoming class the people that are coming into our interviews for PhD school are traditionally non-traditional now. At this point, it's almost broken the mold. They're like, "Oh, I came back, or I had this other job. It didn't work out well." Yeah, Pure Southorn. Yeah, you retreat out of this shitty job market, and then and people see that as a good thing. Like, "Oh, good for you, get a degree," but really just kind of stalling to a better job market. But yeah, so don't be so quick to attribute it to the fact that they're terrified of having a job.
Yeah, or that they're too selfish to get married. Like, to get married, you have to feel financially secure. It's not a narcissistic thing if you're just focusing on if you have $20 in your bank account at the end of the month and you don't own a house and you're not getting married. It's not because you don't want to.
Or you're swimming in student debt.
Right.
Like, millennials right now, we have, I can't remember how much is it, like 40? I can't remember, but I'm just going to throw a crazy number. It's trillions. It's in the trillions of student debt right now. I mean, you can't blame these people. Anyway, fuck that. That noise. I won't entertain that until someone can approve it, just like any good skeptic should. But I think we're getting out of the Trump territory.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's all, a lot of people explain the rise of Trump because there's a rise of the me generation and the me, mine. I'm the most important. He kind of, as a reality TV star, he kind of embodies this idea that all the cameras should be on me, and that, he's a walking Instagram, right? Like, he's a walking Twitter. So I don't know. I just feel like it's a really lazy correlation to say like Trump rose to power because millennials are selfish. In fact, millennials seem to be supporting the person who's trying to say it's not me, it's us, right? So the opposite of what you expect from a narcissist.
Yeah. But yeah, well, thanks. I think that pretty much wraps up this episode. Yeah, so we appreciate that. I wonder if we have any feedback. Speaking of narcissism.
Come like our show. Pass it on.
That was International Women's Day the other day, by the way.
I know. Yeah.
Did you see what Dan Harmon said about it?
No.
No. He's like, yeah, I like women, but international women, I'm more of a national women kind of guy.
I like the local women better.
Yeah. This is pretty funny. Oh yeah, we did. We got a tweet at us last time. I talked about the one where somebody in one of their co-hosts was a Mississippian, goes to Ole Miss. This one's from Heathen Mother, and it says, "Hey, you should really listen to more Skeptic Rat. They're Bernie fans, and they're hilarious."
Oh yeah, Skeptic Rat. I have heard them. Well, if this is the same show, they're actually more of a Hillary camp. Like, they like Bernie, but they think it's like an insanely impossible dream, so they're just kind of giving up on the idea. It's more like, I like Bernie's ideas, but he has no chance in hell of winning the nomination sort of policy, at least the last I've heard from them. But they are located in Valdosta, Georgia, if it's the same show, and cool. So more deep south atheism happening.
I appreciate that. Yeah, that's we need more of us down here. Yeah, so appreciate that feedback. Did we get any emails? That's a good question, David. I'm gonna check right now because I didn't have that pulled up. We recorded our other podcast.
Talking about like how good we were at multitasking. So don't worry, fellas and ladies, it'll go pretty quickly.
Yeah, my gosh, yeah, we've got a lot, but I've got a lot going on here. If you could see my desktop, yeah, nope, nothing, no emails. Which again, it's kind of an antiquated system. But
I know, no telegraphs either.
No telegraphs. Not that there's anything wrong with emailing us, please faxes? Do. But no, stop. Yeah.
Dear podcast, stop. Keep it up. Stop. Yeah. So if you do want to send us a telegraph via email, that's the God Theory Podcast at gmail.com, or you can find us on Facebook.
Yep. And also on Twitter, twitter.com/GodTheoryPod. Try to log on there every once in a while. I am not very good quasi-millennial because I don't tweet a lot. But every time I get someone tweets at us, I'm always like, oh, thank you. Look at you. So nice to reach out to us. But yeah. Anyway, yeah, other than that, you can contact us just by leaving comments on the YouTube page or whatever you want to do. But until then, I guess we'll next week we're not recording because I'm going to be going up to Colorado, up to David's area. I'll be snowboarding on a ski resort, a ski trip, basically, for a group of friends.
And before you go making assumptions, you will not be getting high. So don't just think he's coming up here for weed. Jeremiah's not a fan of how it affects him.
I tried it. I tried it legally up there, and I got wrecked, son. Like, I ended up in your closet just like curled up going, why is the time so slow? I was walking back and forth for what I thought was probably like 3 hours, but I think it was probably like 10 seconds. And between the bathroom and your room, and I was like, I can't. Fuck's going on, man? And then like I just curled up in a ball and I just turned off all the lights, and I had I'm not kidding, I had a stopwatch on my phone. I clicked start and I was just watching it go, and I was like, why is it so slow? And I just lost my
It was not a
shit.
pleasant experience. And then we talked you into it a second time, and you were just like, I gotta go for a walk.
I gotta walk for an hour. I just walked in the open air.
It's not your drug. You're more
not my
mountain
jam, buddy.
kind of guy.
But it feels good. Right before that, there's like 30 minutes of awesomeness. I'm like, oh, shit's awesome, man. Or the other one where I was laughing all the time, the kind of sativa, the one that makes you laugh. Love that shit. I was like, this is great, until fucking Brian was like, dude, watch my watch. And for some reason, it freaked me out.
Yeah, we just gotta find a strain that'll work for you. Just give us like 8 or 9 more bad trips, and we'll eventually figure it out.
As long as I take a moderate amount, like, remember that part I took a quarter of a dose, and I
the second
had a
time you
problem.
took like a quarter of a dose, and then you still were just freaking out.
Yeah, but so I'll take a quarter of a quarter, and then we'll figure something out.
Like what is it? Where you dilute the water and it gets more powerful, then you dilute that and it becomes even more powerful.
Oh, homeopathy?
Yes, well, homeopathy, some marijuana for you.
There you go. But anyway, all right, dudes. So not next week, but then the week after that, we'll be back. And I think it's that week or maybe the week after that, we've got the philosopher on to talk about the ethics of violence, which I'm excited about.
Oh, I thought we were going to look at – they was going to help us find the philosopher's stone. That's way less exciting.
Yeah, sorry, man. All right, until then, we'll see you guys later. Thanks for tuning in.